You have any questions? Yes, Jamila.
What are the fundamentals of ethics?
That's a really good question. Can I take some classes in ethics and then...
I'm trying to be like you. I'm trying to be a master of
I wish I knew. And I don't say that flippantly or jokingly. There is a saying that we have in Persian that there is always a line that should never be crossed in, say, a husband and a wife relationship. In other words, if you are my wife and if I'm your husband, and once in a while, jokingly, I look at you and I say, "Oh, Jamila, shut up," for example, and you look at me and say, "Oh, Amir, shut up." And these are good times. So when you and I cross the line and we use profanity to some extent, because we are joking, it's lighthearted, you're not going to be offended. In fact, both of us will get a good laugh. The funny thing about life is that life creates a lot of difficult situations that are not so funny. But once you and I become accustomed to me looking at you and telling you to shut up, or vice versa, when times become difficult, complex, because now I'm in the habit of just telling you to shut up, in difficult times, I'll tell you to shut up as well. The difference now is that because the situation is no longer one of fun or pleasure, but hardship, you're going to take offense to the thing that I said. And now our relationship is going to sour. So, a good amount of how you and I should behave has to do with our culture. Culture, like the American culture, or the Persian culture, or African American culture, the big culture, the umbrella. Then there is the subgroup, which is the way your family brought you up, okay? And the way you are with your children, the way you are with your friends, and the power of advertisements. All of these things shape the way we think, and we feel, and we behave. Let me give you a very kind of cheesy example. Well, maybe not so cheesy after all. Around the 3rd century or so, when the Roman Emperor Constantine had made Christianity the official religion of Rome, the definition for success, for happiness, what it means to be a healthy human being, is to live by and through the teachings of Christ, right? So you have this wonderful story that comes from one of the Gospels about the rich young man. That for the rich young man, the meaning of what it means to be a successful, a happy, a prosperous human being is to make money, right? But then he encounters Jesus, and all of a sudden his perspective begins to change. And so one day he approaches this great man of wisdom, Jesus Christ, and says, "I want to find eternal life." And he says that because all of a sudden he comes to realize perhaps happiness or success or meaning, or perhaps profound, identity is not so much invested in how much money you make, but whether or not you have a soul. And Jesus looks at him and says, well, you know, when you live in the world, there is a certain ethical code, set of codes that you have to kind of abide by. You have to pay rent, right? You have to get married. You have to make sure that sex is after you're married, not before. Don't drink, don't smoke. Don't use profanities. Okay. Now, if you want to follow the spiritual path, all the things that the world taught you, you have to throw them aside. They're no good. Give everything you have and follow me. And the rich young man says, oh, no, that's too difficult for me. Let me go back home. I don't want to follow you after all. And so what you have are two different versions of, I suppose, ethical lives. One has to do with this. You may not like me. That's fine. The best thing to do if you don't like me, keep it to yourself. You don't need to say, I think it's good to be truthful all the times. Because should you raise your hand and say, Amir, I hate you. There is something about you I profoundly dislike. Well, that's going to impact your grade. I'm just a human being. You know, you can very, very easily wound and scar me. And I'm not going to come over there and reprimand you physically. I'll take my pen or just go to the computer and just give you an F. That's my punishment. And what's going to happen to you? Well, you thought that the Christian truth is also applicable for this classroom, but it's not. This is the world. So here you behave a certain way. Should you encounter someone like Jesus Christ, everything that your physical body needs, everything that your emotions related to your life, everything you think about related to your physical life, all out the window. Jesus only asks or is interested in your spiritual life. And all of a sudden you realize, well, when you're with Jesus, you have to ask a different kind of questions, be a different kind of a human being. Okay. So when you ask what are the main principles of ethics, I don't know. It depends who you are, where you are, how you've been raised, what culture. If on the other hand you bring fast forward to 21st century, our role models are who? Beyonce and Taylor Swift. You know, you want to be successful, well, follow them. Hello, hello. You know. And so every generation creates its own heroes. Those heroes kind of tell us how you and I should behave, what the meaning of success and happiness are. Can I tell you a story, Jamila? I think it was my first semester at Laney. Anyways, I retract. Okay. Yeah. Hold on. Danielle. Yeah.
In what ways may spiritual journey influence one's perception of interconnectedness and a role of direction in their own life?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah. In what ways may a spiritual journey influence one's perception of interconnectedness and a role of direction in their own life?
Okay. Well, I'm not going to really answer that question. And I'll tell you why. My son, when he was 2, one day he sits me down and he says, Dad, I said, what? Can you teach me calculus? I said, son, why don't you first learn the numerics? And then do the basic equations, 2 plus 2, 1 plus 1, 2 minus 1. You know, just do the basic stuff. And when you get to be like in high school, then we can sit and talk about calculus. I think before we can talk about the spiritual life, it's interesting and it's, I think, wise for you to kind of figure out your physical life first. Because spiritual life, I think, are very advanced people. You know, 2 18-year-olds, I have no doubt, it can go to the city and get married. No problem. This day and age, where the divorce rate is almost 65%, it's a bankrupt business, but nevertheless, hopes and dreams will govern you for a while. Just wait. I mean, as someone like Jamila and myself, we'll just wait for these 2 18-year-olds to have fun with life a little bit, to consider themselves to be a wife or a husband and a this and a that. I assure you, in a few weeks' time, maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months, maybe a year, what will happen is they'll end up divorcing. Okay. Now, if you consider someone in their 40s or 50s or 60s, if they've been married once and they've kind of tasted the complexities of relationships, if they get married, should they be emotionally and intellectually healthy and physically healthy, I'm sure their marriage would last for a long time. So before we can talk about kind of spirituality, let's kind of unpack what the prerequisites are. In other words, if you want to take calculus, for example, you go to a counselor and you say, well, listen, there is a prerequisite to taking calculus. Have you taken math? Have you taken algebra, trigonometry? And should you say no, well, they're going to say no. You can't really add those classes. They won't even permit you. Okay. So the spiritual life has some prerequisites. At least that's the way I think. So we can unpack that. But before we talk about that, are there any other questions? Stephen?
Cruelty is in nature.
Yes.
Great.
But you have stupid people and you have intelligent people. There is a cruelty of someone like Moses, who just gets rid of all these Egyptians by closing down the sea, drowns all of them, kills them. Or you have in, I think, the Old Testament, God tells Joshua to go to a certain city and demolish the entire city, including its people. And Joshua says, but there are young kids and old people there. I don't really care, God says to him. And then there is, of course, the stupidity of cruelty committed by stupid people. And that's, just look at Oakland. Yep. Yeah, Rosalind, do you know that there is a movie about you? I mean, has your name at least? Do you know what it's called? What is it called? What's that movie? Do you guys know? It's an animation. Rosalind? iRobot? No. Wild Robot. It's such a great movie.
I watched it.
Robot.
It is a good movie.
Yeah, it's a great movie. All right, go ahead.
Is there any one thing that stays the same across all religions? Because you said in a previous answer that success is defined differently by different people, different cultures. Is there any one thing that's the same and consistent throughout all?
I think all religions have the same software, but they come in different hardwares. In other words, I think everybody wants to be happy. Everybody wants to have a good relationship. But America creates its own set of complexities. India creates another set of complexities. Mexico creates yet another set of complexities. But the core is that people get married to be happy. They want to have children. They want to buy a house. They want to buy a car. But every culture gives them different kinds of steps. So if you look at, for example, someone like Moses, he gives us his own sense of spirituality, but it also has some connection to the physical world, of physical life. Jesus, because of his own background, doesn't really much care about school, doesn't really care about marriage, doesn't care about children, parents, doesn't care about those. He just says, leave the whole thing and just come follow me. Muhammad, very much like Moses, says, listen, I know you love God, but look at your neighbor. Injustice is being done to them. Instead of like locking yourself up in a cave and meditating, saying Yahweh or Allah or whatever, go out there, and seek justice for those who need justice, who can't stand on their own 2 feet. So it really depends for the most part on the person who is leading the group or creating a software. Let's say Jocelyn and you both come to my office. I am Amir Sabz, a very 62-year-old man with a certain background. That's not going to change. Your question inspires me to give you an answer that's going to be very different than Jocelyn's. Jocelyn may come with a different set of questions, and my response to her question is going to be very, very different. It may even be both about the same thing. You're asking about the grade, she's asking about the grade, but let's say she's read 1,000 books, you've only read 2. So my response to her is going to be a bit more complex than yours. With you, I'm going to have baby talk. With her, it's going to be more adultish. So it really depends on how you approach a thing and where exactly you are. I don't know how old Erica is, for example, and let's just say she's single. She's single and available, okay? Let's say an 18-year-old approaches her and says, you're very, very cute. Do you want to go out? she'll probably slap him. Okay? Now imagine Richard goes through and says, "Hey, Erica, you're really, really cute. You want to go out? Buy you a cup of coffee." You know, she's going to look at him, close to age, almost the same age. You know, he handles himself relatively well. He doesn't wear baggy pants. His pants are not down here. You know, he's somewhat a bit more eloquent. And she's going to say, "You know what? The coffee sounds good." So if you, for example, read the Gospels, and I keep going back to the Gospels because this is a Christian-dominated environment. A lot of people are more familiar with Christianity than they are with Islam or Judaism or Buddhism. So I'm just going to keep, using JC, short for Jesus Christ. So if you look at the Gospels, what will happen is when children approach him, he tells them stories. When adults approach him, he just calls them scumbags. He doesn't fight with kids, but he certainly fights with adults. And not just any adult. He fights with those who assume to know, the rabbis, the religionists. With kids, he says, "Oh, let me give you a lollipop. That's it. Let me tell you a story." So what you take out of any religious traditions really depends on what you put in. What exactly are you trying to get out? In the 19th century, when they were trying to figure out how to put down different kinds of races of people of different colors. So what you have are these really powerful men who happen to be Caucasians, i.e. white, not regular chaps like us in this classroom, but people with a good amount of physical power who could make changes in society. They look at Genesis and they define the creation of Adam as white man. And from that point on, God only created white people. Black people, brown people, yellow people, they were inferior, less worthy, less valuable. So the question is, when you approach any tradition, whether it's philosophy, whether any relationship, what kind of biases are you injecting into that relationship? Okay. If, for example, let's say you and I are the same age, you're 25, I'm 25, but I've been broken 50 times. Women have walked into my life, left me, abandoned me. Well, I'm going to come to you, talk to you, and create a relationship with you with a great amount of hurt, which means that I'm going to say, "Hi, Rosalind, how you doing? Let's get married." But in the background, I know you're going to leave me. That's my bias. Okay. If, on the other hand, I come to you with a great amount of health, emotional health, psychological health, historical health, the idea of being abandoned or betrayed doesn't exist in me. So I'm going to come to you in a very pure, innocent way, honest way. It's only perhaps time that will reveal whether or not I made the right or the wrong mistake. Is it no good? Whatever, yeah. We'll come to you, Daniel, in just a minute.
Oh, no, I was just.
No, I know. Your question, I mean. Yeah. And then, yeah.
Is self-flagellation an appropriate response to a culture that gives you such an easy life?
What do you mean?
Is it reasonable to have an expectation to create your own pain and misery as sort of penitence for how easy and simple your life is?
So, self-harm as a way to get to paradise. Okay, let me give you an example. You want to learn how to play the piano. Okay, that takes time, it takes discipline, it takes care, it takes passion, it takes dedication, responsibility. But you also have a lot of friends. You also smoke, you also watch porn, and you hang out with your friends, you party all the time. Okay, now it's going to be somewhat difficult for you to give up your friends, to give up smoking and drinking and watching porn and so on and so forth, right? Now, and every time you walk away from your friends and you sit at the piano only to realize you're really bad at playing the piano, but if you want to get better, you need to continue to make sacrifices. There is going to be this part of you that says, you know what, I'm never going to get good at the piano. Let me just go back and hang out with my friends. But there's another part of you that knows that you can't really become proficient in anything in life if you're not dedicated. So what you do is you say, you know what? I'd rather sacrifice my friends to the piano or for the piano. I'd rather sacrifice smoking and drinking and porning and just focus on playing the piano. So what you have for the most of, I suppose, the past 1,000 years of Western tradition is that religion was this dominant force in human life. And you also had culture that supported religious narratives. It's not that people didn't want to have sex, but they were profoundly faithful to the Christian tradition. And what they got from it is that, listen, it's inappropriate to have sex before marriage. It creates a good amount of emotional instability, and you don't want that. And it impacts your reputation, your name, your parents, all sorts of things. So you know what? If there is lust inside you, and if there is someone attractive out there, go to them. Don't just have sex with them, marry them, and then have sex. And the production of sex creates children. And all of a sudden, sex goes into the closet. Now you spend the next 50 years of your life just raising your kids. So self-harm really has to do with what exactly is your goal. If you have no goal, if you're like a leaf in the hands of the wind, and one day the wind goes this way, the other day goes this way, there is no reason for you to focus your life or your mind on anything at all. I mean, consider moments when all of us in this class fall in love. Imagine you and I are in love, right? And I say, Matthew, I'll call you at 6. And if you're in love, you're going to be waiting by the phone, all showered up, suit and tie. You're going to be sitting by the phone, you know, at like 3 o'clock, right? And you'll keep looking at this phone to buzz. 5:59, 6, nothing. 6:30, nothing. Aren't you sacrificing a whole host of your life by just waiting for my call? Absolutely. Why do you do it? You're focused. You want to talk to me. That's what love does. Whenever you're passionate about anything, and it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, people who love to consume alcohol, they sacrifice their wives, their husbands, their children, money, youth, kidneys, liver. If you don't like something, you're not going to sacrifice. I mean, this class was full. Look at it now. And I assure you in about 4 or 5 weeks' time, there'll only be 10 people. That's how things are. You are never, ever, ever going to sacrifice anything unless there's a good amount of passion. Now, this passion could have 2 branches. It could be fear, and it could be love. And most of us just fear. I mean, you don't really want to come to this class. I don't really want to come to this class. I just don't want to get fired. And you don't want to get an F. And that's our common root, fear. So if you watch like a movie where this guy who happens to be a monk keeps this chain in his pocket and once in a while bangs his back with his chain, well, you have to understand the theology of Christianity or philosophy of Christianity. The body houses sin. You know, and let's just say you're a heterosexual person, a woman passes you by, she's showing a lot of skin, what do? You're going to look, and then you're going to fantasize. Imagine if you had just roped your back or chained your back and it's all bloody. Pain would be far too great and far too intense for you to be distracted by a naked body. It wouldn't happen. Pain keeps you focused, especially religious pain. Pain is really, really good. It just depends what kind of pain and how you're using the pain. Some people don't know how to use pain the right way, so they get depressed. And that's an additional few dollars in the pockets of pharmaceutical companies. Elise, yes.
When you revisit like your writings and also art you did, is there should you be like a certain age when you do it, or should you be at the chest area, which is like the emotional stage?
I'm sorry. Is this part of the audios?
Yes.
Oh, so I was wondering why you mentioned chest and emotions. I'm sure a lot of you in this class have journals. How many of you have journals?
Well, I mean, define journal, like, is it like something you like,
Yeah, you write. Yeah,
oh, not
you put down your shit,
oh, I don't know what.
and it is really just poop. So let's say you're 18, 19, 20, 30, 40, 50, 900, doesn't really matter. So you realize that Skylar, right? No. Derek, no. What was your name? Yeah. Adrian, yeah. So, have you ever been constipated?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh. So what usually happens is, I'm not really sure what happens, but you eat food and nothing comes out, and you drink stuff and nothing comes out, and so you kind of get a little bloated, I suppose. You feel heavy. There's a good amount of discomfort inside you. It's difficult for you to laugh. You want to eat food, and you do, but there is a part of you that says, don't eat. You know, nothing is going through. And so at a certain point, your body is able to process, break down things, and you run to the bathroom and, you know, you let it go, right? Let's say that you and I are in a relationship. And forgive, by the way, my ridiculous analogies, but this is the way I am, so forgive me. So, you love me, and I like you. Did you get that?
Yes.
Unequal power. Good job. So, because you love me, you will sacrifice more. And because I only like you, I have to think about whether or not I want to like give you this or give you that. Okay. So I demand that you change the way you dress. With 25, you say, I'm an American. He's from the Middle East. Middle Easterners are barbarians. I'm American. I'm civilized. He has no right to tell me how to dress. Add to it, I'm a 21st century woman. I'm independent, autonomous, independent, all that stuff. I'm going to dress the way I want to. So I come home. You're still not dressed the way I would like to be dressed. I leave. Well, you want to process the experience, but you can't. So what's going to happen to you? You're going to be constipated with emotions, with thoughts. You want to figure out why I'm such a jerk. It's such a simple thing, and yet I've made it such a big deal. Okay? Why did I have to be such an ass to slam the door shut and walk away? Well, you wait for me to come home so we can sit and have a conversation. I'm not going to come home. I drive to my parents in Roseville. I'm going to stay there for a couple of weekends. Okay? And there comes a point where you've lost enough sleep, you haven't eaten, you're unfocused, whatever it is that you're doing, there is no focus inside you at all. And then you say, there's no one I can talk to. Let me just write this stuff down. Little by little, you're trying to figure things out, right? But as you're trying to write things down, you realize that your writing is a little, well, it's unprocessed, really. It's all over the place. It's filled with anger and hostility, and there are hints of compassion and forgiveness, and then you self-reflect and you want to understand my culture, you want to understand your own culture, you want to know why I'm such a crappy guy and why you're so hard-headed, all that stuff. Okay. And eventually I'll call you and say, Elise, you're breaking up. It takes you 2, 3, 4, 5 years to recover from this episode. Eventually, you run into Derek. You guys get married. And then you have a daughter. And then one morning she wakes up. She's like 12. And she's wearing a rope. I think by then, that's where we'll be. And she's walking the streets, you know, a very tiny mini skirt and showing a lot of skin. And you say to her, don't dress this way. And all of a sudden, let's just say your daughter has a big mouth and a smart mouth. She says, Mom, I'm an American. I'm young. This is my life. Get off my back. Right? Now, you know what happened in our relationship. It is true that I'm no longer around you. Maybe I'm dead. It was like 10, 15, 20 years ago. But inside you is a trigger point, a button, or a file that's about me and you. And the moment your daughter says this, all of a sudden this file opens and you go back in time and you say, that's the reason why he left. Now you go back and you read your journal and you realize your writing was so infantile, so stupid, so childish. So there are all these different stages to writing. You know, first you write because you're just constipated, you want to get the emotions out, you want to see them on paper. And then it's going to take you 5, 10, 15, 20 years to actually understand what exactly it is that you were going through. And then once you understand, you know, the episode that took place some 10, 15, 20 years ago, you realize how stupid you really were. But it just takes time. There is this wonderful story. I think if there is anything you should read over and over and over again for the rest of your life, like 1,000,000 times, it should be the prodigal son in the Gospel of Luke. You know, and for those of you who don't know the story, I'm sure many of you do, but if you don't, it's a guy, a kid, very much like me and you know, who has lots of money or lots of riches. Like, you can either be rich by having lots of money, you can be rich by being very attractive, you can be rich by being athletic, lots of energy. So richness comes in a variety of different shades, right? But you don't really know how to use your looks in a healthy way. You just keep collecting junky people in your life because everybody's attracted to you, right? Or you have a lot of money, but you never really worked for the money, so you got this money in a very cheap way. You inherited the money. It's not really part of your own blood and sweat, so you just spend it casually. And there comes a point where this human being, who is really just a wasteful of a human being, they hit a dead end. In other words, they lose all the power that they had in life. In other words, if I was like a Brad Pitt, very attractive, I'm no longer attractive. I'm no longer young. You know, I have a cane now. I have my third leg. I limp along very, very slowly. I've lost all of my hair. I'm not really attractive anymore. People don't even look at me, and if they do, they have a good amount of pity on me or for me. And so once I begin to lose my power in life, then I am forced to sit back and reflect and say, really, was I really that stupid? I mean, look around you. There are some people in this room who are not 18. Now, if you calculate this the right way, the way things usually should happen, and it didn't happen for me either, is that you graduate from high school around the age 18, you finish college around 20, then you go to a 4-year school, you get done with your bachelor's around 22, you get done with your master's around 23 and a half, 24, let's just be kind and generous, 25. And just in case you have parents who are high achievers and are push you to become also a high achiever, or maybe you just got friends who are lustful for higher and higher degrees. They push you because jealousy and envy in those scenarios are really, really healthy. So you get your PhD by the time you're 31, 32. Okay. When you look at some of us in this room, you realize what? Well, they assumed that if they pursued a different path in life, they would reach this paradise called happiness or success or contentment. Okay? Maybe life got in and changed the narratives, forced them to drop out of school or they got pregnant, whatever the case may be, right? But all of us have a tendency, when time passes, we are forced to take a huge pause, stand somewhere, look at our lives and say, man, I was so stupid. And the nice thing about the Gospel of Luke story is that the prodigal son story is that that is what we go through from the moment you are born until the time you die. And there's a reason as to why. None of us come to life with a software that has all the information as to how we ought to live, how we ought to behave, how we should talk, what sort of friends we should have, what sort of people we should marry. It doesn't have that. We try things, we make a lot of mistakes, and if we are lucky, only if we are lucky, we are stopped by life, we get really sad and depressed, we become really, really angry, and then hopefully in that particular environment of darkness and sadness and depression, if you're lucky, like an alcoholic, you say, you know what? I don't want to drink anymore. I need help. Now you read a lot of books, like going to the AA center, you know. Now you want to like hang out with people who are relatively healthy in mind and body and emotions. But whenever you do anything that you haven't done before, you're bound to make mistakes. Now, in a culture such as this, where people are floaters, in other words, at the moment you turn 18, your parents kick you out, or in fact, you want to go out. You have a culture filled with trash. Again, our heroes are Beyonce and Taylor Swift, right? Look at all the reality shows. These are like trash that we gulp down, okay? In the 50s and 60s, our heroes were like Mahatma Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Che Guevara. All those people are gone. The culture is very, very different now. We love trash. Trash gives us pleasure. And it's quick pleasure. You know, who the hell wants to like follow the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi? It's too much work. We've become far too selfish, right? So, in a trashy culture such as this, it takes even longer for you to catch yourself, to have a good amount of regret, and you punish yourself emotionally and intellectually and physically even, and then hopefully something will blossom. Okay. The problem with a culture again such as this is pain is bad, getting old is bad, making mistakes is bad. You should get to know everything and have everything by the time you're 20. It's just not possible. And this is a culture run by the corporate world. And every human being is like a Duracell battery. Okay? Everybody wants to grab the buck that you have in your pocket, which means that they don't really see you as a human being, but as a customer. And the question is, well, what can they create? Henry Ford, who was really the main guy who brought the auto manufacturing in this country, but regardless, there came a point when he began to make toasters. And he began to make a lot of toasters, where there were so many of them left in the factory itself. He said, well, what the hell am I going to do with all these like many thousands of toasters left? No one's going to buy them. Everybody has one. So you know what he did? He began to advertise these toasters to his own workers. He sold them for half the price. But because the workers didn't have any money, what he said, I will loan you the money, but I'm not really going to give you the money. You'll just work an extra 40 hours for me. And before you know it, these people no longer have any lives. They come to work at 3 a.m, leave the factory at like midnight. They don't see their wives, they don't see their kids. Okay. I guess the point I was trying to make is it takes a long time for you to understand what exactly it is you're writing. There is another thing you should understand about the American culture. It's a confessional culture. Everybody wants to open their mouth and tell you about their shit. And people are full of shit. Like a lot of shit. I mean, this is not like the first time that in our history of, the human race that parents have not been around. I rarely saw my father. Ask some of the Africans who come here, immigrants. Life is tough. You don't see your father. You don't see your mom. And just in case you do anything wrong, they'll kick you, smack you, punch you. Physical abuse. It's an extension of parental love. Right? Now, no therapy is needed. Not in India, not in Iran, not in many parts of Africa. Right? Now, look at this place. You're 2, you have a therapist. You're 5, you have like 2 therapists. You're 25, you've gone through 55 therapists. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I'm saying our threshold. If before we had a container that was 5 gallon, where you could contain 5 gallon of shit inside you and nobody would know. Now, if it's an ounce, the whole world knows. And then the question is, well, if people are so thin-skinned these days, well, what can you do? And the answer is maybe nothing. I don't know. I mean, you have to be very lucky for someone to come into your life. I mean, have you seen that movie, Four Brothers? Any of the Scots? You haven't seen Four Brothers? It's a life story of Jesus Christ. I'm just kidding. It's like Mark Wahlberg and a few other fellows. So what you have is this older white woman who is adopted from foster care, 2 black kids and 2 white kids. And these four guys have become so close that they consider themselves to be brothers. Now, of course, the backstory, the movie doesn't tell us, but consider for a moment. You have a white woman. And when you're older, Jamila and I will tell you, you just don't have patience for too much nonsense, right? And I don't know at what age she adopted them, but you have to give. I mean, when you're in foster care, man, that's a lot of wear and tear on your emotional body. I mean, you've been abused in so many different ways, right? And so I don't know how much patience she had, how much love she had, how often she looked the other way. She forgave them for all their crummy behavior. But she must have done it so many times that eventually they mellowed. Like there were this frozen sea of ice because of all the harshness and abuse of life. Now they begin to have love and faith and trust in this old woman and then each other. Unless you're as lucky, as to have a woman or a man walk into your life and shower you with an enormous amount of generosity, of emotions, of time, of money, then all the difficulties or complexities of emotions created inside you by life, eventually they'll disappear. But how many of us are really lucky to get that? So whenever you want to understand anything worth understanding, 20 years. Give yourself 20 years. 20 years. If you don't like your father, 20 years to understand it. And when you come to understand why your father is the way he is, you love him. If you really understand him. Because life is complicated. It's not as black and white as you and I think it to be. But initially, everything is black and white. The gray area is when you understand and you say, Dad, I love you. You fucked up, but I love you. Jocelyn.
Why do you think our culture has become more thin-skinned? What has progressed that?
It's too much to go through. I like to break things open, but some days when people ask me questions, and I know those questions are important, but those questions have a good amount of history that it needs to be unpacked. I say it's too much for me today, but let me give it to you in a way that perhaps you may find interesting. I came to this country, first of all, Iran is a tough place. My parents would wake us up at sometimes 3 in the morning. We had to walk to something like a Safeway, which was like 2 hours of walking. You walk at 3 in the morning to get to Safeway, and you stand in line for like 5 hours for a pound of meat or a gallon of milk. You know, and you can't tell your mom, I'm not going to do it. Your father is right there with the belt. You know, and you stand there for 5 hours. Then you go to the butcher and he says, I want a pound of that kind of a meat. And says, you're sorry, you're out of that kind of meat. Can I give you fish? I said, fish? Well, I don't know if my mom wants fish, right? So you walk back home empty-handed. The point of this is that when I was in Iran, everything that we wanted, it was really, really difficult to get. And you know you had no right to whine, to cry, to scream. They would slap you. It was a cultural thing. I'm not saying that physical abuse is good, but that was the just norm in our culture. Then I came here as an immigrant. Now, I don't know if you know the life of immigrants. I'm not talking about immigrants perhaps now who come from certain parts of the world where they come here with a good amount of money. That wasn't the case for us. We delivered newspaper. I was a janitor. I washed dishes. I mopped floors. I was a maid in Davis Motel. I washed cars for about 20 years. I worked at Church's Fried Chicken, graveyard shifts. And when you do that sort of stuff, what happens, your skin grows really, really thick. Okay. But I got married here, and my kids were born here. They weren't born to a guy who had to slave every single day. Okay, they came here to a guy who has a relatively decent place to live, have a car, have some money, have a decent job. They are born in the cradle of privilege. And I'll be the first one to tell you, my kids, they suck. They will never be as thick-skinned as me, or my parents, or any immigrant. Because they don't really understand how money comes, what it means to work hard for anything. They don't know what it means to have like 20 people living in a single fucking studio. They don't have any clue. Right? And so you have to kind of sit back and look at your kids and worry about their future because life is tough. And these kids are not tough. If you were born in India in a very harsh environment, some of the things you think that you're going through that are very, very tough and painful, they wouldn't be. A good amount of who and what we are and what we think to be valuable and, worth our time, change your environment and you realize, well, they're not really. So I can give you another scenario. There is a way you could cheat the system. And let me tell you how that works. Let's say you send me an email and you say, Professor or Amir, can I come to your office? I want to talk to you about some things. I say, sure. So you come to my office, and because I'm from the Middle East, the first thing I say to you as you sit is, Jocelyn, would you like some coffee or some tea? Can I make anything for you? And it's not because I like you. It's just part of my culture. It's imposed upon me, and I'm burdened to ask that question from anyone and everyone who walks into my office. Okay. Now, thankfully, you just had your coffee before coming to my office, and you say, no, thank you very much. Right? You're at least mature enough to say thank you, but no thank you. So you and I sit, and then you begin to tell me your life story. Let's just say. Now, I don't really have a Messiah complex. I don't want to come into your life and figure out why your life is the way it is and why you're broken by that particular life in this and the other way. That Messiah complex I had, it left me some years ago. I'm not interested in your life. But if I find myself attracted to you, that you really want to think and you really want to change, right? And because my culture is different, I will say, I know you just had coffee, Jocelyn, but let me make you tea. It's Persian tea. So, ooh, okay. Okay. I add some exotic like components to this tea. By that I mean just verbally. You know, Persian tea is really, really good. Darjeeling especially, which comes from India and it's mixed with this and that. And so I create like this Harry Potter scenario for you that if you drink tea, you'll be flying, you know, anyways. So you had only wanted to come to my office for like 10 minutes. An hour passes, 2 hour passes. And I do something really interesting. I said, Jocelyn, listen, I gotta go to class, but you stay in my office. Just relax. I have some food in the fridge, help yourself. If you wanna make coffee, tea. Really? Yeah, but it's okay? Yeah, it's okay. He said, well, what if he doesn't like think or imagine I'm gonna like take something, steal something? I don't care about those things. They can do whatever. And he said, well, that's really interesting. He trusts me. And then all of a sudden, you're overcome with a certain amount of comfortability. You're surprised by yourself, by me, by the whole thing, right? And then next time you say, Amir, can I come to your office again? I say, sure. And then you open your mouth and you want to talk to me about your life again. I say, no. Why would you want me to come into your life? I mean, you have nothing really to offer me. It's something we talked about in class on Thursday. You have nothing to offer me. I'm not interested in the life of an 18-year-old, 20 or 30-year-old. I've lived those lives. And as an immigrant, pleasure is part of hardship. I saw the things that you want to figure out. Okay? What I want to do, the trick is this. I want to pull you to where I am. Now the first thing I'm going to say, so what are you doing in school? Don't give me business, economics, history. These are like ridiculous fields to study. I say, Justin, listen, how much money you got? Not very much, but how are your parents? They're okay. I say, listen, why don't you study humanities or philosophy? What is that? What do you care? Just come to classes, sign up for my classes. I'll help you figure out what classes you need to take. And in a year and a half time, you'll finish Laney College. And then I have some, connections at San Francisco, East Bay, other places. You can go to get your bachelor's in philosophy or humanities and get your master's. By the time you're 25, you'll be done with the whole thing. How old are you? By the time you're 25, you'll be done with the whole thing. And then what do you ask? Then you come here. I'll get you a job. You'll make about $60 an hour, starting. And if I'm dead, I have friends around. You see Kendra there? Kendra was in your position. She now teaches 5, 6, 10 classes a semester. If I'm dead, someone like Kendra or someone else will help you. Now, what this will do is, instead of you journaling about the stuff that lives inside you, you write philosophical essays for classes that you don't like, but you need to pass. And when you're 25, you have a master's degree. Now you can go to class. Now you can talk about your stuff, but philosophically. And you'll be your own therapist, and the classroom will be a therapist office, and the students will be your ears. You look at them, but you're actually talking to yourself. And as you speak more about your stuff, you begin to see the flaws. And then you'll adjust, you'll revise, you'll refine the way you think about things. But you're not going to do that unless I create a great amount of passion inside you. And to create a sustainable passion, it takes time, energy, not on your part, on my part. And the question is, am I willing to give you my life for the next 2-3 years? Does that? Yeah. Yeah, don't hang out with 18-year-olds. or 19-year-olds. Hang out with like healthy people. The problem with hanging out with healthy people is that they demand too much and they expect too much. But you'll probably resist hanging out with healthy people because you will always go back to the things that are familiar to you. Even if you have a good amount of anger inside you, you're familiar with that. That's your habit. And someone needs to love you enough, care for you enough to see that every time you run away to go to anger, it will grab you by your hair and pull you back and say, no, you're not going there again. You know? So, change. The desire to change really has a good amount of luck in it. Luck. Yeah.
If the goal is to become passionate about a singular self, to direct your life into, how do you combat apathy?
So when I was playing tennis in Davis, I wanted to be a pro.
Davis.
Yes, of course. So I would get on my bike, go to the campus around 8 p.m. and play with the tennis wall because I had no friends. And while you're playing with the tennis wall, it's like journaling. You say, man, I'm really like doing a great job, right? You're inspired, you lobby, you serve, you do all sorts of things with the wall. And the nice thing about the wall is that every time you hit the ball comes back straight to you. And it creates the illusion that you're really, really good. It's like you hang around with mediocre Christians and you guys all think the same, right? And then all of a sudden Jesus knocks on your door and you say, oh, I've been waiting for you. And Jesus looks at you, who are you? I'm a Christian. No, you don't smell like Christian. You're more like a devil than a Christian. And I say this because there was a guy some time ago, his name is C.S. Lewis, who wrote this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book called Screwtape Letters, where a devil is teaching, who's going to retire soon, is teaching his nephew how to become a devil. You know, since he's retiring, he needs someone to kind of continue to deceive and manipulate people, their psyches and their emotions. So he looks at this young nephew of his and says, listen, those who believe, leave them alone. They're doing our job. But those who have a good amount of doubt, you need to deceive them. Because doubt is very, very dangerous. Doubt forces you to go to the library, read a lot of books. I mean, consider for a moment. You read the genealogy in the Gospel of Matthew, and Jesus goes back to Abraham. You read the genealogy of Luke. Luke takes him all the way back to Adam, right? Now, if you happen to be a self-deceiving sort of a person, you say, oh, well, you know, it's because Abraham was a this and Adam was a that. They're both the same. No, they're not both the same. You know, and as long as you believe and you want to manipulate things to kind of fit your own narrative, no one needs to deceive you. You've been deceiving yourself for a long, long time. If on the other hand, you're inspired to say, well, why is this difference here? Why is it in the Gospel of John, not a single story comes out of his mouth? What the hell is that all about? You have the synoptics, Matthew, Mark, Luke, story after story after story. Not a single one in the Gospel of John. Why? So someone who's curious, doubtful, takes his sari behind to the library and begins to read. Those are the people you need to be careful of. Okay? So doubt is really good. Now, then late at night, accidentally someone would also come on their bike, hitting with the tennis wall. And you look at him and say, hey buddy, you want to go and like play on the courts? Yeah, let's do it. And then you realize this guy is really, really good. The wall created an illusion that you're really good. On the court, you realize how bad you really actually are. And there comes a point after like 10, 15, 20 minutes, you say to the guy, I'm sorry, I want to go home and cry because I thought I was good, but you revealed to me how bad I really am. And all of a sudden, apathy comes about. Sometimes apathy comes about because you get slapped in the face and it's a little too real, and you realize you're profoundly incompetent, and you kind of just sit somewhere and you don't want to do anything. And the only hope you have is maybe passion can come storming into your life so you can pick up the tennis racket, go back to the tennis court, and perfect your game. Apathy is normal. Imagine you and I in a relationship. I really work hard to kind of figure out what the hell is wrong with you. Then I give up. I'm exhausted. I need some time. Give me about 5 weeks. Then maybe I'll be inspired to come back to you and say, okay, what's your issue? If you're talking about chronic apathy, where you just become completely indifferent, that's a different story. Anyone else? Was I no good? It's okay. Anyone? No one? Erica? What time is this class over? What time is it now?
That clock's like 8 minutes better.
So how much longer do we have?
10 minutes.
Oh, 10 minutes. Okay, 10 minutes. Anyone else?
Better on the Super Bowl.
No, man, I didn't watch it.
I lost.
Sorry to hear that. Yeah. Yeah.
Dedicate that book you mentioned to J.R.R. Tolkien.
Sorry?
So you mentioned
Harry Potter?
Nope. The one by C.S. Lewis.
Oh,
I
okay.
randomly looked it up.
Yeah.
You mentioned it. So then it says he dedicated it to J.R.R. Tolkien. And I know they both write those other like more. Well, I know Tolkien's is a more fantasy.
Oh, no. There was another guy.
There was another one.
Yeah, he wrote a lot of different books.
Because I saw this scripted letters by C.S. Lewis.
Yeah.
So, and then it says it's dedicated to Tolkien.
Yeah, he was a thinker. Yeah. Anyone else? That's it? Yeah.
Do you think religious music is crap?
I think if you pay attention to your psychology, you realize that they're very much like your taste buds. That there are days or moments where you like ice cream. There are moments you like coffee. There are moments you just want water. And I think inside us, sometimes you just want sex. Sometimes you want sex with meaning. Sometimes you want sex with passion. Sometimes you want sex with love. It's all sex, right? It's all a male part into another part, right? But the intention behind it changes because you change. There are moments where you spend a lot of money on yourself, and as you're walking, you say, I am so tired of spending money on myself all the time. I just want to give $10 to someone. You know? It really depends on how you want to define religion. The word religion basically means returning. You know, and I suppose if you were to look at children, that they don't think about the future. And children's frontal lobe is not fully developed, so they don't really hold on to the past too much. They can't. You know, they don't really have a memory bank just yet. And so they just do things. They drag you to Safeway or some place. They get a toy for $50. 10 minutes later, it's destroyed. That's how they function. And you can't make them feel guilty. It doesn't work as a parent. And so what happens as you get older your entire life becomes transactional. I will write you an essay, you give me a C. I will come to class, give me 20 points. Once in a while, you catch yourself saying, you know what, I don't really care about the grade. I just want to sit, listen, ask questions, not for a grade. I'm really just interested. It's like the sense of curiosity that you had as a child, but got lost because of the busyness of life, all of a sudden returns to you. And it's an inspiring moment. It's, you could say, a religious or a spiritual moment. There are moments where you want to listen to certain kinds of music that brings about specific kinds of emotions about you. You know, it's kind of like, you know, you loved your grandfather, he died, and you're driving by the cemetery, it's where he was buried, but you're listening to like Taylor Swift, you know, or Snoop Dogg, right? And as you're approaching his grave, you realize that you need to honor it perhaps a bit more. So you turn off the music, or maybe you just put some classical piano or something, because the music doesn't harmonize itself with the things you're feeling, you know. So, I mean, you need to understand, at least for in the Western tradition, for 1,000 years, church music was the only music available. You know, and one of the nice things about church music was it was an extension of philosophy, which was to tell you, you know, you're just a scumbag. You know, you want to make money, just don't be too greedy for it. You want to have sex, just don't be too lusty for it. Don't be gluttonous, you know, because things down here are not going to last very long. The only thing you need to really focus on is your soul. That was people's mentality for 1,000 years. Now that modernity has sucked the soul out of people and trashed it, all we are is simply just walking bodies, just passions. And most of the desires that you and I have inside you are really just consumeristic, capitalistic, and they don't really have much of a longevity. They don't have much of a shelf life. Which makes it really difficult for us in terms of romantic relationships. Because just in case you want a long-lasting relationship, you have people who, on the inside, everything has a very quick expiration date for them. Because the culture doesn't allow anything to last for too long. You may love someone, that's wonderful, it's beautiful. It's an experience to be had many, many times in a lifetime, right? But you've created a culture, and that culture created people like us. We don't really know how to be in a long-term relationship with anything. And in as much as you want to return and be with someone for 20 years, it's just not going to happen. Yeah. Maybe on Wednesday we can talk about your question, but go ahead for now.
But correct me if I'm wrong, have you not been with your wife for over 20 years?
Yeah.
But then that kind of like step down, like
Well, I'm not really talking about my generation. I'm talking about your generation.
everyone.
Also, you need to consider, even if I wanted to divorce my wife, I wouldn't know what to tell my mom. I mean, I'm a 62-year-old guy. But when it comes to my mom, I'm really scared of her. Yeah, shame, guilt, my name, their name especially. You know, my mom is 80. Imagine her going to like a gathering with all other Persian women. They're just a party of sorts, right? And someone looks at her and says, "Oh, Miss Sabzavari, I'm so sorry to hear about your son's divorce." You know what that's going to do to her? She's going to have a heart attack right there and then. Yeah, absolutely. So even if I don't like my wife with passion, I hate her, I will stay with her.
That's interesting.
And you know, you don't need to like your wife. You become addicted to another human being. There is a stray cat. I don't like animals. Animals are only good for eating. But she's been coming, you know, to the house meowing for the past 5 years. So you know what I did? I went to Costco, stole a huge bag of cat food, and I give this stupid cat food every single day. And once in a while I say, come to me, let me pet you. No, she says, fuck off. But I continue to buy food for her. Ungrateful beast. Addictions, habits. We're victims to it, all of us. Well, thank you. You guys have wasted enough of my life. I'm just kidding. Well, it's good to see all of you. I'm glad you're healthy.
Likewise.
Just in case, you want to come by the office or email me, feel free. Just make sure, if you want to come by the office, make sure to email me beforehand. So take good care. See you Wednesday. Thank you for your questions.
That's the thing with cats, though. No matter how I did one of them, they take